This is section 2.2, part 1, the introduction to these two sections. Okay, and we're going to talk about in section 2.2 conditional statements. All right, so our objective here is to recognize conditional statements and their parts, and that's what part 1 is going to deal with. Part 2 will deal with writing converses, inverses, and contrapositives of conditionals. Okay, so all we're going to do is we're going to be able to recognize conditional statements and their parts today. All right, so a conditional statement. A conditional statement is an if-then statement. So if this thing, then this thing. Okay, so if one thing happens, then this thing's going to happen. An if-then statement. The hypothesis is the part P, or the part that follows the word if. And as you look over here on these symbols, this is read right here, if P, then Q. Okay, if P happens, then Q happens. So the hypothesis is the part following the word if. Okay, following the word if. The conclusion is the part following the letter, or the word then. Okay, so you're going to have to be able to identify hypothesis and conclusion from an if-then statement. So I may say, if you study, then you'll do well on the test. And the hypothesis would be you study, and the conclusion would be you do well on the test. Whatever follows if and then, that's going to be the hypothesis and the conclusion. So let's take a look at a couple examples here. What are the hypothesis and the conclusion of the conditional? Here's the conditional. Okay. Remember, the conditional is an if-then statement. If an animal is a robin, then the animal is a bird. Okay. So whatever follows the word if is the hypothesis. So the hypothesis here is the animal is a robin. Whatever follows the word then is the animal is a bird. Okay? So as we look here at this example. Okay, as we look here at this example, the conclusion would be that the animal is a bird. Hypothesis is the animal is a robin. Hypothesis follows the word if. Conclusion follows the word then. Okay. Second one, what are the hypothesis and conclusion of the conditional? If an angle measures 130 degrees, then the angle is obtuse. Okay. So again, the hypothesis is whatever follows the word if. If an angle measures 130 degrees, the conclusion is whatever follows the word then. It is the angle is obtuse. Okay? So you're going to have to be able to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion of a conditional statement. Okay, so we've talked about identifying hypothesis and conclusion. Now let's actually write a conditional. How can you write the following statement as a conditional? So the following statement is vertical angles share a vertex. Okay, and what I've written here in italics is how you would write the conditional statement. It says, if the angles are vertical, then they share a vertex. Okay? If the angles are vertical, then they share a vertex. Again, an if statement, a then statement. If you were to identify the hypothesis would be the angles are vertical. The conditional statement, or the conclusion, would be they share a vertex. Okay? So, how can you write dolphins or mammals as a conditional? If an animal is a dolphin, then it is a mammal. Okay? Again, hypothesis would be the animal is a dolphin. The conclusion would be it is a mammal. You're also going to have to be able to find truth values. Now, the truth value of a conditional is either true or false. So your conditional that you have is either going to be true or it's going to be false. To show that a conditional is true, show that every time the hypothesis is true, the conclusion is also true. To show that a conditional is false, find only one counterexample for which the hypothesis is true and the conclusion is false. So in order to prove it false, you have to show that the conclusion would be false from the hypothesis. Okay? So, is the conditional true or false? If it is false, find a counterexample. Letter A says, if a woman is Hungarian, then she is European. Okay? This, in this case, is true. Okay? It's true because if you live in Hungary, it is a European country. So you are European. Okay? So in that case, it's true. If a woman is a Hungarian, then she is European. Okay? Letter B says if a number is divisible by 3, then it is odd. So if a number is divisible by 3, it has to be odd. So what you're doing here is you're trying to look for a counterexample to see if it's true or false. Well, in this case, this would be false. And you could do a number of counterexamples, but 12 is a great counterexample. That's even and divisible by 3. Okay? All right, so here's what I want you to do for this part on part 1. Okay? I want you to answer the question, is the conditional true or false? If it's false, find a counterexample to these last 2 questions here. Okay? And this is section 2.2. This is part 1. Okay? Don't forget to watch part 2, and then you'll have one WSQ for both. Okay? This concludes 2.2 part 1.